Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, June 7th, and this week, Dara's plea to Japan, drivers with guns, and a lack of flexibility. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Green. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to have us here on the first Friday of June.
Yes, it's insane. I feel like every time we do the show, it's another month has passed, even though we do it every week. Time this year is flying. It's crazy.
It really is. It's halfway over now. So, get ready for the summer and we'll be in the holiday season before we know it.
Yeah, unbelievable. So let's jump right into it. Some interesting topics this week. Definitely unusual. Very different than the usual topics, which they're fun. The first one is Dara is interested in having Japan look for independent contractors. That's his focus. So he's saying, hey, Dara has an ask for Japan. Let drivers work as independent contractors. And this is from Kyodo News. And they reported, quote, Uber's Technologies Incorporated top executive, he urged Japan to allow rideshare drivers to work independently rather than obliging them to work under taxi companies under a scheme meant to address labor shortages in the local industry. He said there would be a lot more people willing to become rideshare drivers if they could work flexibly as independent contractors. He said this at a press conference in Tokyo, adding that the Japanese version of ride sharing has been slow to take off since a ban on such services was only partially lifted in April. So funny enough, Brian, he's trying to spread the quote unquote religion of independent contractors in Japan.
Yeah, it's an interesting story because it's obviously self-serving for Uber. If Uber can break into the Japanese market with the same setup that they have in the United States and in much of Europe, it's obviously going to benefit their bottom line. There's a huge number of people who are willing to work as rideshare drivers. There's obviously a huge demand for rideshare services. So, Dara, sees blood in the water and is ready to pounce on it to try to make some more money. The question here is whether the Japanese government will allow it and whether it's actually good for the worker. We've taken a stance in the past that the current system that we see in the United States and in Europe with independent contractors isn't really working. It's a race to the bottom for a lot of workers, and in that pay is low. There are very few protections. If somebody gets sick, if somebody's car is damaged, you name the issue, the company can just kind of throw up their hands and say, not our problem, and the worker suffers. What I'd like to see happen is, yes, I think that there is an option in Japan and everywhere for a third type of worker, not a traditional employee, not a traditional independent contractor, something in the middle. And perhaps Japan can open up the world's mind to that type of situation. Like maybe Japan is the perfect market for Uber to come in with regulation, with a mindset from the government as to how are we going to do this to protect the public, to protect the worker, to make sure that this is fair for everybody. And perhaps this is the template, whatever they do end up doing in Japan, that the rest of the world can look at and say, okay, this is something that we can base our system off of and maybe make some necessary changes. I mean, obviously, all speculation at this point. This is not the path they're going, but that's where my mind goes when I hear of perhaps a compromise that could satisfy the company and the government.
Which I think is smart. And, one thing that's mentioned in this article, which I think is almost kind of lame on their part, is, they're saying, amid persistent safety concerns, Dara is saying, hey, look, safety is a priority, while stressing that it is one of the top reasons customers in other markets choose Uber is due to its incorporation of technology, features, and partnerships. Now, the reason I think that's such a ridiculous selling point to Japan is one of the most advanced countries in the globe. So if Japan is telling you, literally, they're telling him, look, we're still concerned about safety. And his response is, yeah, we safety, sure. But hey, we got the technology. I just don't think it's a big sell like he thinks it is over there.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I think Japan and the Japanese market is ripe for some innovative thinking on rideshare and some new ideas, is that the government is focusing on the right issues from the start. And in a lot of governments and cities and states and even federal government systems, Uber has just plowed their way in, dictated how it was going to be, and then left the governments to respond. Here we have Japan stepping in and saying, no, 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 you're not coming into our market without a plan that we agree to. And I think that if they do this the right way, it's a real opportunity for the rest of the world to see what rideshare can look like with proper regulation, with worker protections, and holding the company accountable for things that matter to our public and to our workers.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with you, and I'm really curious to see how this plays out. I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing story to see where this ends up. I can't imagine they're going to want to stop, and Japan does seem interested to expand it at some point. So we shall see. We're going to head to story number 2. A new rideshare service comes with armed drivers. This is from Axios. They reported, quote, Black Wolf, a gun-toting TikTok famous rideshare service, recently expanded to Miami with a fleet of armed drivers from police, military, and security backgrounds. The founder was a private security guard and University of Miami alum. He launched the company starting in Atlanta in 2023 and now has 25 drivers across Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and other Florida cities. The way it works, riders can request an armed or unarmed driver. The drivers must have at least 4 years of policing, military, or private security experience. There's also front-facing cameras in the car recording live video of the trip. I'm curious what you think of this, Bryant.
What could possibly go wrong?
Interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Now, look, I understand that safety is of the utmost importance. I don't know that arming the drivers in the vehicles is the answer. Um, what this tells me is that this company is prioritizing driver safety. That's great. I think we want to be looking for ways to keep the driver safe, but I don't know that this is the answer for making rideshare safe for everyone. Um, you know, Having an armed driver doesn't really protect the passenger. We don't see so much of assaults on Uber and Lyft vehicles from outsiders. Like, of course, you hear about the drive-by shooting that happens. Of course, you hear about some random events, but the vast majority of violence that seems to occur in rideshare occurs between the driver and the passenger. A lot of times between the passenger to the driver, sometimes the driver to the passenger. This doesn't really seem to solve that whole problem. It just, there's a weapon in the vehicle, and if something goes wrong, if there's a heated exchange, if there's, things can escalate very quickly. So I don't know that adding guns to small spaces is the answer here.
You know what? I'm going to sound probably crazy, but I actually kind of like the service. But not. Here's how I think about it. I looked into this, and it's fascinating to me. I don't. Having guns in a car is definitely not. It doesn't. There's a lot of both sides on this, but yes, as you said, it could really turn south pretty quickly. I think they're promoting this wrong. Actually, I think that this would be a very interesting and unique service for high end executives, people in dangerous areas having to transport things. Almost, it sounds weird, but it's almost like Corpian dystopia. But I actually think there's a market for that. For the everyday person, like you said, I don't know if I don't feel. I mean, I would just take it because, hey, how cool is that? I have like security guards, but I don't think I wouldn't feel any safer. It doesn't, like you said, we're not having drive-by shootings in the cars every day. It's not Twisted Metal, the video game, if you guys remember that. So I don't know. It's an interesting concept though. And I do, at least they are kind of, maybe it's swinging too far one way, but we've seen on the other end of it, drivers get guns pulled on them. And then if they had a gun to protect themselves and shot back, they get deactivated. And so it's like, so where's the balance here? I think that's the crucial key.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of like a security car for, high end uh transportation. Say you're a jeweler and you need to move your product from one store to another. Yeah, that's a nice service. And I understand then having protection in the vehicle because you're like actually being protected from a threat. That you understand somebody might be watching you with your briefcase of jewels leaving one store and thinking about robbing you. And certainly I understand wanting to have that protection, but I just don't see how putting a gun in the vehicle makes rideshare safer for the driver and the passenger alike under the vast majority of circumstances. I would like to see innovation that has better security, better like recording, monitoring, doing things to um, try to curb bad behavior as opposed to having a system that seems like it escalates things in an unnecessary manner inside the car.
Yeah, like I said, I look at this more as you would just take this because you want to say, "Hey, I'm cool and I have an armed driver." And there's only 25. I think there's only 25 drivers on the road right now, so not a ton, but it is quote it is growing. So clearly there's a demand for it,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And we'll head to our final story. Revel is laying off 1,000 staff rideshare drivers and moving to Uber's business model. This is from TechCrunch. They reported, quote, after dropping the moped sharing business in 2023, Revel is pivoting once again to abandon one of the main things that made its ride-hail service unique. The startup is laying off its 1,000 plus drivers and embracing a gig worker model similar to that rivals Lyft and Uber. The move comes after Revel successfully piloted the model in late February with about 100 drivers and has since brought on 100 more. And then they said, quote, the reason we ran this pilot in the first place was just increasing feedback from our driver pool as well as our in-recruitment efforts. This is from the vice president of corporate affairs at Revel told TechCrunch. He said they said the leading reason people didn't want to join Revel was lack of flexibility. So interesting. Again, we're kind of playing with this. Do people want to be independent contractors? Do they want to be staffed? We've seen it both ways, Brian.
Yeah, we've seen it work really both ways. We've seen companies where they have employed drivers and given all the benefits and been wildly successful. Like Alto is an example of that, where they've really moved into several markets, hired drivers, and everybody seems to be pretty happy. Um, what I'm seeing here is that Revel's business expenses were getting too high, and they are looking for ways to shift to, um, you know, keep more of the money in their pocket as opposed to putting more of the money into, either drivers' pockets or, providing benefits to drivers. I don't really, I, the way if a driver signs up to be an employee of the company, that's the mindset that they're going in with. They want that structure. They know what they're getting themselves into. I don't really buy that drivers are saying, "Oh, I want more independence." Well, then why wouldn't they just go work for Uber and Lyft?
Right.
If that's really what they were looking for, then there was an easy solution for that. So I see this pivot as cost cutting. I see it as Revel looking over at Uber and Lyft and perhaps seeing greener pastures from a business perspective. But I don't think that these Revel drivers are going to be better off with this move. We're going to see, I think, pay decrease. We're going to see situations where drivers need the benefits that they used to be entitled to and no longer can receive them. So ultimately, we're seeing just a new company step in and try to compete with the big boys. And typically, when that happens, they don't do very well because the market is pretty saturated right now with those two big players.
Yeah, I think just like you said, right, they're going to compete with Uber and Lyft, and it's going to really be a price race, and then get the branding. It's going to be really tough. I think Alto did a really good job also because they started out really small and strategic and found a city that actually was interested in that sort of work and also interested in that sort of as a passenger getting that type of ride. This sounds like they just sort of got some funding from BlackRock, threw out a service, and said, well, this is what drivers want without really knowing the market. And I think that, like you said, maybe it backfired. And then drivers and also what they don't, It's easy to say that they wanted more flexibility. The real issue might be, well, they want more flexibility because the hours we give them, they're not getting rides. And they're not getting rides because people don't know they exist. So there's a lot of things that aren't being said, obviously, in the article that could cause this. But I think, as you said, I think the bottom line is it's money. They're not making money the way they thought they would.
I think that's exactly right. So they're going to follow where they think the money is. And in the rideshare space, I think being different or unique is important, because if you're just offering the same service that Uber and Lyft are offering, you're not going to compete. You're not going to get a large enough market share to really be successful. You have to be offering something that they don't. And Revel was. And, maybe they needed a different mindset in terms of marketing. Maybe they needed to add different types of perks and, find out what it was that their clientele really was looking for. But they had something that was different that could fill a space in the market. And now they're just going to, I think, be, drown next to Uber and Lyft. And how do you compete with those companies if you're just the same as them?
Right. The same without the money behind you and the branding and everything else. It's going to be an uphill climb for sure. Those are our stories this week. Brian, I'll give you the floor before we head off into the weekend.
Yeah, before we head off into the weekend, we always remind everybody that Legal Rideshare is available for free consultations should you find yourself in an accident or injured on the road. We represent drivers, passengers, and victims. Our consultations are always free. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us for a consultation. Sooner is always better, as these claims do not get better with time. You can find all of our contact information at legalrideshare.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.